So thank you, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully many of you know Mapbox. If you don't know Mapbox yet, Mapbox powers location services for people, packages, and vehicles across the world. Today, we're going to be sharing with you how to use our navigation products here at Mapbox. Our agenda today is an exciting one. We're going to start by giving an overview of our navigation service line here at Mapbox and real-world applications for using every product within that service line. We'll talk about delivery routes, rideshare apps, last mile navigation, and building intuitive experiences for drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. And then we'll get into the Mapbox Navigation APIs and SDK, because those are really the building blocks of making your web app or your mobile app run well with Mapbox navigation. And then we've got a couple of presenters joining us. Our first showcase is the When to Leave web app, and then the OilTrails native app. And again, at the last 10 minutes, we'll just have that Q&A session. So feel free to enter those questions throughout the presentation. Presenters today are myself. I'm Leah Mikalinka. I'm our lead customer success manager here at Mapbox. Joining me, I also have David Snyderman. He's our product marketing manager for navigation and automotive from Mapbox. Our first showcase is actually another Mapboxer who's built a web app. That's Kieran McCann. He's a strategic account manager here in the US at Mapbox. And then we have our fabulous customer, Craig Hewlett. He's the founder and CEO who created OilTrails, a native app leveraging navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the content here. And this first slide is from my colleague, David. David, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar. I'm David Snyderman, product marketing here at Mapbox. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is a real map. This is Las Vegas. I just want to give you an overview of, well, just take a look at some of the really cool things that you can do visually with Mapbox. So this is something we made for a trade show a few months ago, and this is a real map. You can go into the Mapbox map and view and see the city and hundreds others like it that have extreme levels of detail for some of the buildings and landmarks and so on. So it's very cool. This is also using Mapbox standard style, which gives you 3D buildings, dynamic lighting and shading, all sort of for free. You don't need to do anything. You can just enable it and use this in your maps and applications, and you can customize it if you like, turn it off, change aspects of it, restyle it. Many of you already know this because you know Mapbox and you're Mapbox customers. So just wanted to start there because it's sort of a fun way to look at one of the best things about Mapbox that our customers love is, of course, the maps. Now, there's a lot more you can do with maps besides the visuals, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. So, Directions API and our routing tool set helps you make your way through that world, route your customers and packages and people through the map essentially. And we do this for a lot of different industries. Here are just a few, and we've got some really great customers to talk about it that use Mapbox in this way for restaurant delivery and groceries, packages, rideshare services, and so on. So there's a lot of different ways customers use routing, and we're going to be talking about our Directions API today and a little bit about the Navigation SDK. So just some examples. DoorDash uses Mapbox now, and when they joined us from another platform, a very well-known platform, they saw an 18% improvement in ETA accuracy, primarily because the dashers are using maps embedded right into the application. So they're not switching back and forth between apps to route, find their way through to the customer. That had a huge improvement in ETA accuracy. On the other side of the screen here, we'll talk about a customer just briefly called Kraken, which is a very large utility customer in the UK. And what they're doing is electrifying British homes, installing smart meters. They were able to do about 3 jobs a day. Then they started with Mapbox, and we power their logistics backend. And now they're doing 8 jobs a day with the same crew, same number of people, but it's just much more efficient routing using our tool set. So it's really incredible. Great success story. And they're also saving 4 million wasted miles of driving by using Mapbox now. Just much smarter routing. The trucks are in the right places. and customers are happier too because they know when the person's going to arrive to do the job. So some really, really incredible examples there. And we'll just go to the next slide and talk about these are some big use cases. There's another one that we do, which is a really major one that I want to talk about, which is automotive. And so if you've looked at a new car in the last couple of years, or maybe you have one of these new cars, you'll notice that the dashboard is primarily a screen. This is a really big part of the experience now. And it turns out the best and the sort of killer application, as we say, for these screens is a map. This is what people want to see. And they're also kind of beautiful to look at. And so when you're not navigating, it's helpful, but it's also a really nice visual. So automakers really love Mapbox for that reason, because they can style the map and get control over what the experience is like for their customers. So Toyota, Rivian, BMW, General Motors, and soon many others use Mapbox, and you'll be seeing more and more of that. The next slide shows an internal concept of a rendering of what like a fully realized experience might be. So you can see this cockpit example. Some of the basics about what the car is doing, ADAS and some other types of functions there, but also the map overlaid with where your car is relative to others, and your turn-by-turn directions. And this is, all possible with Mapbox. So I wanted to talk about a few large experiences like those, but whether you're starting out, you're a developer and a company of one, or you're a company of hundreds, there are a couple reasons why we think customers choose Mapbox. Number one, I mentioned quality of experience. So the automotive example I showed you, that's very important for those types of customers because visually it needs to look great. But we find that for many, many customers, just the way the maps look and react and the efficiency, how they render and the speed is really important to them. It means that the apps that they make or the experiences they create are fluid and fast, and users really like them, whether it's an end customer or an internal user on a business side. Either way, the quality of experience is important. Another attribute and another reason customers like Mapbox is that they can get up to speed really quickly. So our teams, not only do we build the services that you can use through the APIs, we think about the end-to-end experience quite a lot. So we have teams that obsess over these details. They think about like, what would the ideal, grocery delivery app look like, and what would I want as a delivery person? What would I want as the manager that runs the delivery side, and what would I want as a customer, and how should all these things work? So we think through all the details, and so when you start using our SDKs or our APIs, what you'll find is that it doesn't take a lot to get from a concept to something that works really quickly. We have really great APIs and toolkits, so you'll find that. So rapid time to value, and then the other really important thing is ownership and control. So you have the ability as a Mapbox user to customize anything that your users see on the screen. So you can customize the maps. Anything you do, you own. So that's great. And our business model is pretty simple. We don't seek to sell, monetize your customer data. That's yours. So you keep that. So there's a lot of advantages there with Mapbox when you're building on our platform. And there's a lot of activity. We've got a lot of 4 million registered developers, other over 700 million monthly active users on our platform, and a lot of map updates. Every day we update the map, so it's always fresh, and it's a really great platform to build on. So we talked about some high-level use cases, some big companies doing really amazing things. And I would want to bring it back down to sort of square one. The reason I wanted to tell you a little bit about those is just so you can just imagine anything you want to build, you could do it on our platform. We power some of the largest companies in the world, but we also power, companies of one. And you'll meet one of our colleagues later on in the webinar who's built a cool little app he did over, a weekend, I believe. So just to give you a sense of, you can do really amazing things. You can do them quickly. Um, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Leah now, who's going to talk a little bit more about our various toolkits and how you can use the APIs to do some cool things. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so today the whole point is that you meet the Mapbox Navigation Suite if you're not familiar with it. This is the full line of products that we have for navigation, And we want you to think of these maybe as building blocks because there's a combination of APIs, and they perform different functions all related to navigation. And then like working through these building blocks over in the bottom right, you have our navigation SDK, which integrates directly to make mobile apps as easy as possible and really allow that turn-by-turn experience within a mobile device. These are building blocks. A lot of times you will want to provide that turn-by-turn, and that makes sense a lot of times to do in a mobile device. So the navigation SDK would come into play for that. You would want to use the navigation SDK when you're designing for mobile. But in addition to the navigation SDK, you might have a need to incorporate the Matrix API along with it. Navigation SDK combines directions API, which is sort of that main ETA and routing. And it also combines the map matching, which is a neat little API that just helps clean up a route trace and make it look good to an end user after it's occurred. So navigation SDK will get you those plus maps together. But then, you might want to leverage isochrone in addition, or maybe you're not building for mobile. Maybe you have, a web application, and maybe you're building a platform for another purpose, and you really just need ETAs or to understand a route. We have a lot of customers who are using APIs and the Directions API individually in that way. So another slide here that just shows a little bit more about some of these APIs. The Mapbox Isochrone API helps you plan availability and understand how far someone can go in a certain allotment of time. So, we talked about customers who are using Mapbox for sort of back-end logistics planning. The isochrone's a great one. It's not in the navigation SDK, but it's one that you can use in conjunction with it and get that extra feature. Same with Mapbox Matrix API. It helps with ETAs and routing optimization for multiple points. So think about field service delivery. Think about Kraken, who is able to increase their productivity by many points by implementing Matrix API. And then the main focus of today, we'll be talking about Directions API. That is the API that's in play to actually visualize the route that you're going to take, provide that ETA, and provide those turn-by-turn directions. And you can use the Directions API independently, or you can use it as part of that navigation SDK for mobile. So that is a little bit more about the building blocks of navigation. We mentioned that you combine those to serve the needs of your user. And we like to really have customers consider the full experience end to end. Like when you think about a company like DoorDash, it's not just one user for DoorDash. There's going to be the customer who placed their order and they want to know when their food's going to arrive. There's going to be the restaurant that is going to have to return some information, and then there's a driver that's going to have to route to the restaurant and then route to the doorstep of that customer. And there's some logistics going on behind the scenes to decide, who should take this drive, and what's the most sensible logical order to put these order deliveries into. And so all of these different tools together can deliver the right user experience. If you're just getting started with navigation, you probably want to pick one audience to start building that for. A lot of teams come to Mapbox and start with directions, which is just that ETA or routing, and they build that for like maybe one of these users, the technician that needs to get there. But then you come back and consider, what about my dispatch team? What about the customer experience? And you can design for these all at once to give a great end-to-end experience for every audience, or you can do it over time and kind of scale out your implementation of navigation and consider your highest priority use cases. But in a scenario like this, our dispatch team would use maybe a combination of optimization and matrix to get that planning what driver should go where. For the customer, you're going to display to the customer the route that's being taken and the ETA, and that's done with our Maps SDK and Directions API. And then for that actual driver who's delivering, and they're picking up food and then they're delivering it to a customer, the Nav SDK is going to be essential to give them that turn by turn, and the Directions API is going to be powering that through the Nav SDK. So that's a little bit about the user experience and how to consider implementing navigation for your use case. I'm going to pass it back to David now to talk about some of these use cases you saw earlier and how exactly they're using these building blocks.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Leah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the examples here. So we mentioned DoorDash earlier. They're using a combination of our navigation SDK because they have a mobile app and the Directions API and the Matrix API. And so I touched on this a little bit earlier, but what this allows them to do is have the navigation directly in the app that handles the other functions that DoorDash does. And so when you combine those two things inside the app itself, the dashers aren't switching back and forth between DoorDash and maybe like a routing app from another company. So this means that it's just a more fluid experience for them, but it also means that the driver location is known to the Dash app as well. So they can do much more detailed, accurate ETAs because we always know where they are along their route. So that made a huge improvement to them for their in-app navigation. It just means that they can have a lower what they call defect rate, which means if they were late or they weren't able to deliver the package or the food at all, which is kind of the worst thing that can happen in that type of business. So we help them reduce that defect rate significantly. So that's really awesome example there. We go to the next one. I'll talk about this one a little bit too. Instacart. So it's a similar type of business. This is delivering groceries. And they're using a combination of the Directions API, the Isochrone API, and map matching. And they also use, well, they have a mobile app, but the reason they're using these APIs from us is a way to map drivers to jobs that need to be done. So, for example, if there is an order to be shopped for or to pick up at a local grocery store, they can use our APIs to find who is closest, and so they can send the job to that person, and they can use the Isochrone API to see, how far or that person could reach within a given period of time. So this really helps them do accurate ETAs for when the delivery will be sent out, so they can have meet their service terms. So they promise delivery within a certain window, so they can make sure that they can do that. So that's one of the ways Instacart uses Mapbox for their solution. And let's go to the next one. I think there's one more, and then I mentioned Kraken earlier in the segment here. So what they're doing is they're electrifying homes in the UK, and they're installing smart meters, which takes several hours. I suppose they were able to do three a day with their crew before they used Mapbox. And when they started using Mapbox for the directions and isochrones, they found that they were able to schedule their crews much more efficiently. So the same number of people out in the field can now do almost twice as many homes a day. And they're saving 4 million wasted travel miles a year, which is really incredible. You feel like the only thing that changed on them, on their side, is the way they're planning their routes. Same number of folks, same number of trucks, but they're almost twice as effective now as they were before. And a lot less stress. They're driving far fewer miles, so less wasted time, and everyone's happier. So they're really pleased with the results that they've gotten from using our directions and Isochrone APIs.
Thank you, David. So that kind of concludes the overview of navigation and common use cases. Now we're going to take it into real examples with real builders of these applications. And the first guest that I have today is Kieran McCann, Strategic Account Manager here at Mapbox. Kieran, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to be here.
Kieran has taken time away from meeting with clients and helping other customers implement Mapbox to create an app of his own called the When to Leave web app. And this app is powered by the Mapbox Directions API. So Kieran, I'm going to go ahead and pass to you to give a demo of this app. For those of you in the webinar, if you want to scan the QR code that you see on your screen, you can check it out too. And Kieran's going to tell us a little more about it and show us how it works.
Sure. I'll
And
jump
while
over.
you're pulling that up, Kieran, if you want to tell us a little bit about how you got the inspiration for this app, that would be great as well.
Sure, yeah. So I was, thinking about my customers as always. And I think the best way to kind of put yourself in the customer's shoes is to try using the services that you're working with. So I was actually at the airport and I had like a delayed flight. So I was in the airport thinking about that problem space. And I've actually missed, I embarrassed to say, maybe like 3 or 4 flights in my life. And most of the time it was just because of a timing issue. So I was thinking about that problem, and it would be great if there's just a way that you could enter your flight time and then get a sense of when should I actually leave to go to the airport. So it's pretty simple. It's called when to leave, not that creative, but I'll walk through how this works, and it's all using Mapbox. I actually use some AI tools to help me build this. I've got some basic coding experience, but you can really enhance your ability with, some of the tools that are out there today. So it's easier than ever to get started. And the Mapbox docs are really easy to use as well. So I'll walk you through this, and it's really simple and anyone can use it. You'll start by, entering your flight date that you've got going on. So let's say I'm going on a flight tomorrow. Let's say it's, kind of early in the morning, at like 9:30. You can choose if you've got an international flight or TSA pre, and that will sort of adjust your time buffer. But let's say I've got TSA pre, so we can skip the line a little bit. And then I've used the Mapbox geocoder. It's going to get your current location, and then that's going to tell you the origin of the route. So we'll start there, get my location in San Francisco, so it will pop up there. So we've got my origin address, and then based on that, I have a list of airports internationally, and it's actually going to rank these based on proximity to your origin. So I usually fly out of SFO. You can see Oakland's also pretty close. So if we go to SFO here, it's going to generate a route line to show you that preview. This is where the Directions API comes in. And the Directions API is visual, but it also gives you an ETA for, live traffic. And in this case, it's using the traffic at the depart time. So this is going to be an estimate of what the traffic's going to look like when I'm leaving around 8 o'clock tomorrow. So we're seeing here in this preview, you know, based on the kind of flow of the airport arrival, you want to have a 36-minute drive time because going through downtown SF, there's a bit of traffic, and then you're going to get on the 101 and arrive at SFO. So that drive time is dynamic. That's going to change based on the time of day that you're leaving. And then basically it's giving an estimate for the wait time at TSA. That's going to be about 13 minutes. It's pretty good. It can be a little bit longer than that sometimes. And then just so that you have a little bit of buffer at the gate, maybe you want to grab a snack, maybe you want to, get to the gate early. You've got 30 minutes before the boarding time as well. So what you can also do here in this experience is click this link and it will bring you over to Uber, and you can, type in, the address for the airport, and then it will bring you there. And then you can also add this to your calendar. So if you've got that flight time on your calendar, there will be an event before it that basically is the full buffer time of like when you need to leave your door and when you need to get to the airport. So yeah, that's basically it. If we kind of tweak some of these settings, you can see if I turn off the TSA pre, it's going to add that wait time to 32 minutes. That's probably a safe buffer. The drive time's the same. And then if we, switch this to an international flight, it's going to add an extra buffer time at the gate so that you're there even earlier. So it's all pretty easy to use. Anyone can try it out, and you can throw it right on your calendar. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
This is great. Thanks so much for sharing that. And it's fair to say that you created this at the airport in a couple of hours from a concept to prototype in just a short amount of time. Is that right?
Yeah, most like 80% or 90% of it was done by the time I got on my flight. And then there were some tweaks that I made over that weekend. But yeah, it's easy to get started. Those AI tools that you can use that are all out there, there's a bunch. You can start leveraging those to get really that idea to prototype up very quickly. And then, a lot of those tools have Mapbox documentation and knowledge. So you don't even really have to, reference the docs themselves. You can just ask, the AI tools to help you there. But yeah, it's really powerful to be able to have that leverage for a non-coder, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to call out. You're a Mapbox sales guy. You're not a coder by design. But
Yeah.
how did you find it working with the Directions API in terms of ease of use? Somebody coming in from less technical background and trying to use Directions API.
Yeah, so unlike, maybe the SDK where you're going to be integrating that into an entire app experience, and maybe that requires a little bit more hands-on knowledge, the Directions API is just a simple response, and it has the ETA, it has the origin and destination, and then it will generate the route line for you. And you can easily integrate that into the map, or you can use it without a map at all and just get the ETA. So, in terms of accessibility and just getting ready to rock pretty quickly, the Directions API is a really easy place to get started if you're trying to bring a navigation experience into your app or your website.
Very cool. And I know you mentioned that you don't have to render the map. We do have several customers. I think even you have some of those customers who are not really rendering maps, not using turn by turn, but they're using Directions API and others in our stack for this kind of back end behind the scenes planning. Um, can you share any interesting use cases you've seen leveraging ETA on its own?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times when I talk to customers, they say, "Oh, we don't really have a map, so we don't need to talk to you." And then, the response is, "Well, you don't always need a map in order to leverage location."
Right.
You could think about a store locator. Maybe it has a map on the side, but you could just have the list of stores or destinations close by. And like I did with the airport sorting, you can sort it by proximity. And then you could also have just an ETA on the side. So it's like, from your house to this store, it's only a 15-minute walk or, a 10-minute drive. And that can actually kind of make the customer more likely to engage and go into that location because you actually have a good sense of, oh, it's not that far. I can just go over there during my lunch break. So those
Yeah.
are some examples of how it can be used.
Yeah, that's great. And we've talked a lot about the sort of logistical delivery use cases earlier, but we are starting to see customers who maybe you wouldn't think have that navigation use case turn by turn, leveraging these other APIs for the location finding and other planning functionality. So thank you for sharing this with us. One last question before we wrap up. Can you share some more detail about the AI tools that you leveraged and what it was like working with those and Mapbox together?
Yeah, so I've tried out a bunch of these over the past couple of months. There's sort of a range of um, skill level and kind of fit to purpose for different types of, starting points. If you're like a total novice, there's tools that you can use where you're just interacting with a chat bot to say, do this and add this feature, and it will sort of code that up for you. And you don't really even have to touch the code. So some examples like Lovable is a good one. There's some others that are sort of in that camp. There's
Mhm.
some that allow you to do like Replit, which is what I actually use for this. It's sort of in the middle. It has the code interface, and then it has this assistant or agent that you can use to interface with the code, and then you can actually go in and make edits yourself. And then there's some that are more like VS Code, but with AI. So like Cursor and Windsurf are good examples of that, where you're writing code and it's sort of suggesting things as you go, and then you can also interact with this sort of agent feature that can help you make modifications to the code and a larger context too. So yeah, you can really just get started if you don't have any experience at all. I'd check out Lovable or some of these other tools. And if
Mhm.
you are an existing, coder who's got, some coding chops under your belt, you can use Cursor or Windsurf and really take your abilities to the next level, and the time to create something, can really be reduced. So it's a pretty exciting time to just be experimenting with these things. And yeah, I like just diving in and trying to do things like my customers. So yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time to be here today.
Yeah,
And I'll go ahead and take the screen share back from you. We're going to
sure.
shift gears a little bit from the Directions API and this web app use case, and we're going to talk about the Navigation SDK. But before we get into that and introduce our next presenter, I wanted to be sure and let everyone know Holly shared a Directions API playground in the chat there. So you can go check that out straight away. And if you want to get started with the Directions API, that playground makes it really easy to understand how to do that and then jump right in. We also have an AI assistant on our documentation that can help check your Mapbox code as well. So just a couple little plugs for that. But now shifting gears, we're going to talk to Craig Hewlett, who is the founder and CEO that created the OilTrails native app that's powered by Mapbox Navigation. Craig, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh yeah, it's great to be here.
So Craig has put together a video for us to get a feel for OilTrails. I'm going to go ahead and play the video for you all now, and then we'll come back and talk to Craig about his app.
Oilfield work doesn't happen in cities with street signs. It happens out here, in remote locations deep in the wilderness where getting lost isn't just frustrating. It's wasted time, fuel, and sometimes even a safety risk. That's why we built OilTrails, so crews can find their destinations quickly and navigate efficiently, even without service. When users open OilTrails, they're greeted with a live dynamic map animation, immediately showcasing a remote field location on the onboarding screen. Instead of a static screen or a pre-recorded video, the camera smoothly rotates around the destination, tilting and zooming to create a real sense of terrain and scale, all powered by Mapbox's camera tools. Field teams need different perspectives based on their work. With a single tap, users can switch between multiple map styles, from topographical maps for clean and precise navigation to detailed satellite imagery with 3D terrain that highlights elevation changes. Here we can clearly see the Rocky Mountains in the background, providing a comprehensive understanding of the environment before navigation begins. Additionally, a route is seamlessly overlaid on the terrain, powered by Mapbox's Directions API. This combination of smooth animations, multi-layered mapping, and real-time routing is essential for creating an engaging and professional first impression. Beyond onboarding, OilTrails seamlessly transitions into the main app experience. From here, users can instantly search for field sites, plan their route, and start navigating, whether online or offline. Finding field locations is the core of OilTrails. Here I'll search for an LSD location, and as you can see, the app uses Mapbox's fluid animation tools to smoothly zoom from one location to the next and show a precise spot on the map. When it's time to navigate, users can seamlessly launch turn-by-turn directions with just a tap. While OilTrails supports multiple navigation providers, including Apple Maps, Google Maps, and Mapbox, we've fully integrated Mapbox's Navigation SDK for users who want in-app routing with custom map styling. Even in remote areas with no service, OilTrails continues to function completely offline. Our proprietary system allows all LSD and NTS locations to be calculated directly on the device, ensuring instant lookups without an internet connection. This is complemented by Mapbox's built-in caching that automatically retains road data for offline use, ensuring users can still see key routes and navigate efficiently even without a network connection. And when online, Mapbox delivers high-resolution satellite imagery and detailed mapping of even the most remote terrain, allowing field teams to better understand their surroundings before heading out. OilTrails isn't just mobile. We've also built a web version with many of the same great features, including field location lookups and 3D mapping. While turn-by-turn navigation is exclusive to mobile, the web app gives teams an easy way to plan routes and visualize locations before heading into the field. OilTrails exists to make field navigation simple and reliable, and Mapbox is a critical part of making that happen. Their 3D mapping, offline capabilities, and smooth navigation tools give our users the best possible experience, no matter where their work takes them. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for that, Craig. That was so nice to give us an overview of what that app experience is actually. Sorry about that, guy. Little bit of live
Oilfield work.
here. Let me make sure I can advance this slide. There we go. So thanks for putting that together for us and giving us a feel for why this app was needed and what it looks like for your users. Can you share a little bit more about the story of how you came to think of this app, the OilTrails app?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in the oil field straight out of high school, early 2000s. And like most new hands, I was just trying to keep up long hours, remote locations. And it's touched on in the video, working in the oil field isn't like in an office. You're always traveling to remote wells scattered across the countryside. These locations are often accessed by unmarked leased roads built specifically to access these wells. And they weave through mountains, zigzag across prairies, and sometimes even made of ice, only accessible during the winter. So back then, everyone relied on like word-of-mouth directions, outdated paper maps, or those clunky dash-mounted GPS systems. And I remember one night I was heading out to relieve on a night shift, and I got directions from the office, and I had it punched into my GPS unit. And heading up middle of the night, it just directions didn't look right, and I was out of service. I had no one to talk to, and I just remember how helpless I felt driving around in the middle of the night trying to find a remote location. And that experience just stuck with me.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be pretty impactful. And so it sounds like you actually just developed an app to solve a problem that you'd experienced and as an oil field worker.
Yeah, so I had another passion is technology, so I enrolled in a remote computer science degree while I was working, and once I built some confidence with my coding, one of the first things I took on was building an oil field navigation app. And it was very basic to start with. It was just a tool to convert industry coordinates into GPS coordinates, and then the app would just open it up in Google Maps. And funny story, at the time, it took about 2 or 3 weeks for Apple to review and publish app releases or updates. So I had submitted the app, and we got called away to work, and I completely forgot about it. A few weeks later, I was working long hours in Saskatchewan, which is about like 800 kilometers away or 500 miles. And I woke up one morning, just remembered it, checked it, and saw it had hit #1 in Canada for navigation apps on
Wow.
the App Store. So it was a surreal moment for me right then. And yeah, just something that started as a kind of a personal project to help myself out and to taken off and just kind of shown how much it was needed at the time.
That's awesome to hear. So you clearly found an audience of people like you, and it's great to hear you had success from right initial launch of the app. I wanted to talk to you a bit about the evolution of the app that you built, and you provided us some screenshots here. So I've got those on the screen. Can you share the initial solutions that you had tried and what kind of led you to switching to Mapbox?
Yeah, so the initial app was very simple. All it was just the users would enter in their coordinates. I would send it off to a third-party API. I'd get coordinates back, and then I'd just switch the whole app to Google Maps, where the user could navigate to their location. So that worked for a while until I tried releasing an update, and Apple started rejecting them because one of my screenshots depicted Google Maps navigation, and rightfully so, they rejected it because it wasn't something taking place explicitly in my app. So all of a sudden, that put the onus on me to integrate my own mapping systems. And I came across Mapbox and was instantly drawn to them because by that time I had integrated that black and orange UI on the screen right now, and I wanted my maps to blend in with that and give a unique look, and Mapbox allowed me to do that.
That's great. And it sounds like, you would come to Mapbox for navigation, but then found your way to maps as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I started off just for the with the navigation. It was easy to implement, and I was able to get my screenshots that I was able to put on the App Store, so I could easily depict one of the main uses of it. And shortly after, like I stuck with kind of the default map provider at the time to show the in-app mapping, and I got complaints about the satellite imagery. So I compared that to Mapbox, and I found that Mapboxes was consistently better for satellite imagery. So from that point on, I switched all my mapping and navigation over to Mapbox, and ever since, Mapbox has like exceeded my expectations. So I've never felt the need to look anywhere else. And today, Mapbox is integrated into every aspect of OilTrails. We use the Directions API to overlay navigation. We use the Navigation SDK to handle the turn-by-turn nav, and the Maps SDK gives us those various styling options that enhance the user experience. And in fact, the maps are a core element of our user experience now, displaying prominently whenever the app is being used.
Yeah, and I have some screenshots here now that are oil trails today. I think it's really interesting that you started with customized styling and then switched to Mapbox Mapbox styles that were pre-existing out of the box styles from Mapbox. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you did that and how that's made things even easier for you?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, the biggest draw starting off with Mapbox was being able to customize my maps. But over time, Mapboxes, like in the box solutions, have just they've been beautiful. Like my favorite styling is that outdoor styling displayed on the screen there, and I use that for lots of my promotional materials, and our UI has changed cleaner, and it just perfectly complements our UI, and they just blend together.
Awesome. Well, and now let's get into those navigation features. So you mentioned in your video that you do allow users to choose their preferred navigation provider, but you've integrated Mapbox for turn by turn. Are there any other features that have proven to be especially useful for your users?
Yeah, so OilTrails has been evolving much as like Mapbox has, like Mapbox or OilTrails has added weather, well data, our web app, cleaner UI, geopics. But a big thing for us, and I illustrated in my story about being stuck out of service, is the offline capabilities. So we put that front and center, and we integrated an on-device coordinate conversion system into OilTrails that users can find locations, get those coordinates regardless of service. So Mapbox's offline capabilities blends with that perfectly. The caching, like we don't even have to do anything outside of the default implementation. Their caching is good enough that we're able to completely use the maps and navigation without doing anything extra other than implementing Mapbox. And then the detailed satellite maps also is always a big draw. That's always an essential to have for anyone navigating in the oil field, because just the nature of the oil field with the remote roads, and sometimes you're in farmers' fields or down goat trails, the satellite, like high quality satellite, is a big thing that users can look and verify their routes.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And I know I've got another slideshow. You wanted me to be sure, or another slide that shows a bit of code. You wanted me to be sure and talk about how easy it was to achieve this user preference. Can you tell us what we're seeing here on the screen and how you were able to give the users the ability to select their own map styling?
Yeah, so here's a snippet of Swift code from our iOS project. At this point, we've already calculated the route and instantiated the navigation controller provided by Mapbox, so we're ready to present turn-by-turn navigation to the users. Now, what I wanted to highlight here is how easy it is to style the map. With a single line defining the style, we're able to apply either a Mapbox provided style or a custom one using a URL from the Mapbox Studio. So in this example, I'm referencing the custom style I tweaked. And then on the side there, you can see the three distinct styles controlled by that one line of code. So on the top, we have the clean outdoor style from Mapbox. The middle is my custom style I applied via the URL in that code. And the bottom is the satellite, also a preset from Mapbox. So I just wanted to illustrate that this flexibility, it makes it incredibly easy to tailor the map to fit your application's needs, whether you want a minimal look or custom branding or detailed satellite imagery.
That's great. And I guess one last question before we get to our Q&A. You're building with our native SDKs for Android and iOS. Is there any reflections that you would share with people who haven't tried using our navigation SDKs before?
Yeah, so that's a little trickier because when I first implemented Mapbox, this was almost 10 years ago, and there's a lot different then. I don't remember any issues with it at the time. That being said, we used Cocoa Pods, but now implementing Mapbox, it's all on the Swift package manager, and that makes everything a lot easier. And everything is well documented on the website. Like the Swift package manager, you just go in, you enter the URL, everything downloads. You gotta make sure your netrc files properly set up, but that's all detailed in the documentation, and it's as easy to implement. Like straight out of the box, you can get a working prototype up in minutes. And for anyone considering Mapbox, I'd emphasize that it's as simple or as powerful as you want it to be. You can implement the basic mapping and navigation features quick and with minimal configuration, or you can dive deep into the customization if your app requires. For example, like a fun little thing, we mostly stick to the default configurations for the navigation UI, but we're able to dig in and implement custom 3D models depicting a pickup truck as a fun little tweak for our users that mostly commute in those vehicles.
Yeah, we can see that on the screen here, the custom 3D model of the pickup truck. And so thank you, Craig, for your time and being here today to share your awesome app with the Mapbox community. We're going to turn it over to the Q&A session for the general audience now. I do have a few unanswered questions in the Q&A feature. I see that Broom had asked if we'd be able to demo the optimizations API alongside Directions API so we can get a sense of how it's supposed to be used. Thanks for the question, and I appreciate that there's probably a lot of folks on the call who want a deeper dive on technical. We're not prepared on this webinar to actually demo using the APIs today, but we are going to be having another webinar that will leverage Navigation SDK and Directions API coming out next month, most likely. So stay tuned as we start promoting those more technical, deep webinars for Directions API and Nav SDK. Related to the optimization API, we have optimization v2 that's in beta right now. If you're interested in using that, reach out and let us know, or I'll follow up with you, Broom, and we can figure out how if it's a good fit for you to use in beta or if it's something that might need to wait for general availability. But I'll follow up with you on that. And then we have a question from Luke Decker. Have you seen any clients use navigation APIs for indoor navigation to indoor to outdoor navigation? We do have indoor navigation that we have actually partnered with another company to provide indoor mapping. But in terms of the navigation specifically, this is something that a lot of our navigation customers are thinking about. They think about DoorDash when, you know, the dasher gets to a big apartment complex and has a package of food for, you know, somebody within that complex. How do you navigate them into a building and out of the building to get, you know, the full end-to-end handoff? I am not sure if we have clients who've really implemented that in live. David or Kieran, if you happen to know of any that are doing that really well today with the kind of from the car into the building type of experience or outdoor to indoor. But it's definitely something we're thinking about. It's a challenge that we are really focused on solving and making sure that the full last mile experience is accounted for, and we've got customers that we're actively working on this with. The next question that I see is for Craig. So Craig, have there been any cases where you had to deal with unpaved roads? If so, how did you handle the navigation using Mapbox?
Yeah, so actually most of our trips are like off-road. Like that's the big draw of OilTrails, is that like all there isn't a single oil or gas site that is off a paved road. So, or at least up here anyways. So all our stuff is on dirt gravel roads, and it's just always getting better. Like sometimes the road won't be there in the mapping side of it, but you go back a month or two and it'll be there. So it's always getting better. But that being said, that's why the satellite is such a big integration for us, and why the high quality satellite imagery is so important too, because even times when like there's no road data, it's because it's not possible. Like sometimes these roads are like winter access, like they're literally made out of ice and only accessible in the winter. So for crews to find these roads, there's no road data, and that wouldn't even be possible. But they're able to look at the cut lines from satellite imagery and plan their routes from there if they need to.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting that satellite imagery has had such a big impact for the oil field workers. That makes a lot of sense. Where there's no roads, that imagery becomes important. Okay, we have another question from Ahad. It says, please tell the difference between using a directional API and navigational API and how to decide. And so we do have a few different APIs that are part of the navigation suite. The Directions API is the one that we focused on a bit more here today. and the Directions API provides the route. So it maps, the route from one point to another and provides the ETA, the time of arrival based on, other conditions within that Directions API call. So if you're looking for an ETA just to understand timing of the trip, or the route to take, or both, Directions API is for you. We don't actually have a navigation API.
Let me jump in. I think, yeah, sorry, Kieran. Well, we can both answer this. I think the question might be about, we talked about our Directions API and some of the other APIs we have, and then we touched a little bit on the Navigation SDK. And
Okay.
so perhaps that's what the question was
I agree.
about. Yeah, and so the Navigation SDK is it's sort of like a suite of tools. Essentially, if you're building a mobile app and you want more integration, and there's things you can do with the Navigation SDK that you can't do with a simple API call. Kieran, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would say that Directions API is one of the building blocks of the SDK. So the SDK is like everything you would need for a turn-by-turn driver app or walking app for navigation. And it's like, think about that like being in an app. The Directions API is one element of that. And then on the screen here, you can see all the other kind of pieces that are included in parts of the Nav SDK. But the Nav SDK is like, you've got a whole toolbox, and then the Directions API is one of those tools, and it can be used independently from needing the entire SDK. So that's
Yeah, we probably could have done a better job drawing the slide. The Nav SDK, that box down there is actually, consumes all the things you see on the screen plus a few other things.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there are a number of APIs that can be used alone or with the Navigation SDK. And then the Navigation SDK would really be essential if you're trying to get turn-by-turn directions in front of a user. But we have customers who don't have that need, and so they're not leveraging Navigation SDK. But again, these are sort of the building blocks. And if you go check out our documentation, we have playgrounds and extensive documentation for each of these. I hope that helps, Ahad, and it is a little bit confusing, I can understand, but you can use Navigation SDK with these other APIs as well. Okay, I see another question from Roger. Is it possible to improve Central America's time calculations in Matrix API? My team and I developed a web app for displaying traffic times in Guatemala, but we had problems with the time precision. We had some extra minutes in rush hours when traffic is very busy, when the times weren't accurate. So thanks for the question, Roger. It sounds like you were leveraging the Matrix API. We did talk a bit about how we're constantly improving our maps and location information. Kieran, is there anything that you would say about traffic data in particular that could maybe help in Roger?
I'm back. So I think that the key with traffic time estimates is that Mapbox gets better over time as we increase our user base, especially in markets around the world. So we have 700 million monthly active users, but as we get more and more users on the road, more and more cars on the road, we actually improve our ETAs and improve our accuracy over time. So we've got really competitive ETAs around the world, and in other markets, we're going to be continuing to improve. So you should see those ETAs improve with accuracy over time, as more users are interacting with our services. So.
Yeah, and we're always looking to improve and get more data and more information on various networks, road networks. So yes, we'll constantly be improving the APIs. I'm just looking through. We don't have any other questions from the Q&A feature. I'm looking through to see if there's any in the chat. Doesn't look like I have missed any. I guess one last thing I can call out, since we have a couple of minutes, is the Navigation API playground, or the Directions API playground. If you guys wanted to play with that and take a look at it, I can show you what that looks like a bit. And so this was linked in the chat as well. If you want to come on into the directions playground, you can get a feel for what it looks like. You can put in coordinates. You can add the routing profile for the different ways of transport, and really just get a feel for playing with Directions API in your own hands and get a feel for what it looks like. I mentioned our AI assistant as well that lives on our documentation pages. That's this little Ask AI tool in the corner. This is a great tool when you're getting started. You can ask it questions in simple language. You can even have it check snippets of code. So that's available to you right within the playground as well. It looks like please add examples and documentation for Flutter as well, like Java and Swift was another question from Ahad. I have to say that we have actually been working on improving documentation for the SDKs and putting Flutter versions out there. So we do have Flutter as a supported version now for SDKs. And in terms of Java and Swift, we're always looking to go and improve different frameworks or explore new frameworks that our customers are adopting. So that's another area where you'll see more over time as we continue to evolve our products for navigation and others. I think that concludes our session for today. And if there's no more questions, I'll just go ahead and say thank you everyone for attending today. This will be recorded, so you can check back to our website if you ever need to review this recording again for any reason. Go check out the playgrounds, check out the documentation, and check your emails for more of those functional developer sessions that we'll be promoting over the course of the next month or so. We'd love to have you on one of those as well.